Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I've got the latest in the Glock 26 lineup. This is a Glock 26 Gen 5, and of course it's chambered in 9mm. And this is basically the latest evolution of the Glock line, and the Gen 5s change a few things, really. They add a couple features and a couple changes, but none of it is really a landmark change. So let me go ahead and pick this critter up, make sure that it's not going to try to bite me, which it's not. And one of the changes is fairly obvious right off. There are no finger grooves. It has the same basic stippling pattern that the Gen 4s have, which is aggressive enough to keep the gun in your hand, but not so aggressive that it hurts, or if it's up against your body that it's going to chafe you. But the finger grooves, which are kind of a polarizing thing, you either kind of love them or hate them. I happen to be lucky enough that the finger groove on the Glock 26 and the other Glocks fits right in my hand. So when I close on the finger grooves, it works. I didn't have any problem keeping a hold of this one though. So the lack of the finger grooves really, to me, isn't a big deal. But some people absolutely hate them, and I get it. If your fingers are off because of the size of your finger and the groove were to land in the middle of a finger, you'd find it unpleasant. It does have a decent undercut, so you get right up there, and it has a decent beaver tail. So, a nice undercut in the trigger, and then a decent beaver tail. So most of the time you're going to be good not on these and not get slide bit, unless you get your hand back up here, or if you have particularly thick hands up here, you might have just enough that comes up. But overall, you shouldn't really get slide bit with any of these if you're holding them correctly. But just in the event you are one of those unfortunate ones that does get slide bit by Glock, the later Gen 4s and all of the Gen 5s come with these extended beaver tail back straps. So if you put that back strap on there, you're going to have a beaver tail that's going to kind of come out behind it. Now, of course, without putting it on there properly, it's not as easy to show, but roughly that's what it would look like. They come with basically three settings. No back strap at all, which is equivalent to basically the Gen 3 SF or short frame ones, medium and a large, and it comes with or without the extended beaver tail. So that's a nice feature with the Glocks, and they're easy to change. There's one pin right here you push out with the Glock disassembly tool, put the thing on there and push the pin back in and you're done. It does come with a longer pin, which is inside this little grip assembly. The longer pin is needed if you use a back strap so that the pins don't stick out the side and bite into you when you don't have the back strap on. But overall, they've retained that capability in the subcompacts. More and more subcompacts are coming with that, but a lot these days are ditching that feature. It has front and rear slide serrations. They're typical Glock, straight up and down. They're aggressive enough to get a hold of easily, but not so aggressive that they tear you up. So like when I go up, my finger wants to hold on to it, but if I force my hand across it, it's not tearing me up or scratching me. They come with the very contentious U-dot sights, which I happen to like. They work well, they're easy to see, they're bright. If you don't like them, there's two choices. There is a factory night sights option, and the night sights are tritium with a ring around them, so they're usable during the day and usable at night. And there's a whole long list of aftermarket sights you can put on these things. It uses the same sights as the prior generations of Glocks, so the sights are readily available. And while I've got it on this side, it has Ambidextrous slide stop slide release, which is only on the Gen 5s. That's a feature they added in the Gen 5s. That's really the only major feature added besides the front serrations. Beyond that, functionally it's very similar to the Gen 4. Well, I've got it here. It's 6.42 inches front to back. It's 4.17 inches tall, and with the flush magazine in it, it's very flush. And it's 1.3 inches thick. So it's not the smallest subcompact out there from a thickness perspective. There are a few that are thinner that hold similar capacity, but it's one of the shortest in the grip, and being that the grip is really the hardest thing to hide, that can make a big difference in carrying one of these versus something else. The mag that's in it is a 10 round, and don't let this scare you, it's actually got an orange follower. I'm sure that's very scary. Not only can you do the orange follower scary 10 round ones, but you can put the 15 round ones in, and it will work. You can also use 17 round mag from a Glock 17. This one happens to be a 19X, which has the 17 grip, but really doesn't matter either way. They're basically the same magazine. And then a whole lot of magazines that are just too scary to show on YouTube. So you've got a lot of flexibility in the capacity. They also do have factory mags right from the factory that have a +2 extension on them that also acts kind of as a pinky rest. So you basically get your 3-finger grip with it. So there's a lot of flexibility in that with the capacity and the additional luxury of being able to use any prior mags. So if you've got a Gen 4, all of the mags will work. If you've got a Gen 3, they'll work as long as you don't reverse the mag catch, which is reversible, but that requires Gen 4 and above magazines to take advantage. The trigger on this, so let's go ahead and do the trigger. Minimal take up. A little bit of a flexible wall. There's kind of a little bit of travel in the wall and then a crisp break. Nice short reset. You're right on the wall and then the break. And by the way, one thing I forgot to mention, the Gen 4s do come with 3 magazines, which is nice. Some of the guns right now are coming with 2 or even 1 and sometimes coming with a coupon. These are coming with the mags in the box. Now this is a little different than the Gen 4 trigger, which tended to have a defined wall and then almost no travel, so it'd break right about there. But it was kind of a sharp wall. Trigger comes in around 5.5 pounds. At the range, I really didn't notice a difference between this and a Gen 4, so it works about the same. It's actually a little smoother than a Gen 4, but if you're used to that defined crisp wall, that may be a little change, especially if you want to ride the reset. You know, you fire it and you want to be right on that reset and then break it again. It's a little more difficult to do with this without just a little bit of practice with it. Now there's one feature they didn't add, it still kind of surprises me. There's no rail. And the Glock 26 and the 27, the matching 40 caliber version, don't have a rail. And most of the subcompacts in this category have at least have a single slot rail. So that's a little bit unusual. Now the good news is the 26 has never had a rail, and the aftermarket has well accounted for that. So there's a large selection of trigger guard mounted lights, lasers, and all sorts of accessories. So the lack of the rail doesn't necessarily cause a problem. It just does surprise me a little bit that they haven't taken the opportunity to add that feature. You know, flesh this out a little bit so that you have a guide and then a slot and you'd have a rail. So if you're looking for a rail-mounted lighter laser and you can't find a trigger guard mounted one that makes you happy, then that would be an issue that you'd run into with this one. As far as maintaining it, maintenance is the same. So you make sure it's clear, pull the trigger, wrap your thumb around it, close your hand, and just kind of close your hand. That'll take the tension off a little bit, and then slide it apart. And I have noticed that this one is a little bit, kind of hangs up a little bit coming apart. Other than that, internally, it's the same Glock you're used to. If I had a Gen 4 slide and set it next to it, the only thing you might notice that's different is the shape of the drop safety plunger. They're kind of horizontal in the Gen 5s. In the earlier guns, they were round, but they function basically the same. It has a dual recoil spring, which hasn't changed a whole lot. Now, one thing that has changed is the barrel. Let me get my light here. It's the Glock Marksman barrel. And it's a hybrid between conventional and polygonal rifling. There's a good shot right there. You see the polygonal rifling in the middle, and on each edge of it there's a set of grooves, which would be typical of conventional rifling. So the Glock Marksman barrel is that hybrid between the two. You just kind of get the benefits of both, and any of the negatives of either kind of get canceled out. You still have to be careful with shooting hard cast bullets in a Glock because of the polygonal rifling. They can have a tendency to plug up. Reassembly is relatively easy. Drop the recoil spring in. Now I have noticed that this one is a little bit temperamental on reassembly. Of course, that time it went right back together. I had a couple cases where it kind of wanted to hang up and I had to wiggle it a little bit. Which does bring me to a characteristic of this particular one, the specific one that is unusual for Glock. It was a picky eater at first. So we have Blazer brass that we tend to use, and it's really good ammo. In fact, it's kind of our de facto go-to of quality ammos. It would not run. It would partially feed, it wouldn't lock back. So I really came to the conclusion that it was short cycling. So instead of coming all the way back, it was maybe coming 3/4 of the way back, enough to pick up a round most of the time, but then it would hang up putting it into the chamber. And that's unusual. I only ever had that with one other Glock, and it was the very first release of the Glock 42, when they first hit the streets, and they had some design defects that they fixed. After that, Glocks are the ones that typically, if you wake up in an episode of The Walking Dead and you wander into an abandoned gun store and you got 10 seconds to grab something, grab a Glock. It's probably just going to work. This one didn't, and that really is unusual. Now, I'm not going to bash it. I've given other guns a pass on a break-in period as long as they grow out of that bad behavior, and this one did. After about 150 rounds, it was working perfectly with the Blazer brass. It was cycling fully. It was locking back. The way we did end up getting around it is about a box of MagTech. Actually, 2 boxes. And ran the MagTech, which apparently was a little bit more powerful than the Blazer brass, and it did cycle correctly. And after running about 100, 150 rounds, it shaped up its behavior. I don't know if that's something with this specific one, maybe the recoil spring was a hair out of spec, or if that's something you're going to see with the Glock 5s, or the Gen 5s. But that's unusual. That's just not a characteristic I'm used to with these. One other feature that I didn't mention earlier, it's got a little bevel at the front. And it's a little more pronounced than some of the others. The earlier generations were rounded to a bit, but this is actually a distinct bevel. And that does help improve the ease of holstering. It helps guide it into the holster. I don't think it's necessarily a big deal because the slightly rounded edges of the other ones had a tendency to glide in. And talking about holsters, any Glock 26 holster will work for this. So they didn't change anything about the trigger guard, which is the usual area that holsters latch on with Glocks at least. So if you've got a holster for a Gen 4 or even a Gen 3, should work. You may have the occasional one that's really picky, but overall it gives you the ability to upgrade or add one of these to your collection and not necessarily have to go through and buy all new mags, all new holsters, and everything else if you've already got Glock functioning holsters for the 9mm. This will even fit in most 19 or even 17 holsters, just that the holster will be longer than it needs to be. Overall, I found it easy to shoot well once I wasn't concerned and thinking about why was the head giving me a bad attitude. Once I was able to get it past that and it was running and I could just focus on shooting it, it's as easy to shoot as any other Glock 26. It's comfortable to shoot, it's not excessively snappy. With an MSRP of $650, if you can find one, they're actually reasonably priced. Of course, every generation of Glock tends to go up about $50 over the prior generation, but that's just kind of the way it's worked for many, many years. I think it would be a good gun. I'm going to recommend it for now. Now, if I get back out with it and it continues its bad attitude, goes back to doing that, then I'll definitely report it to you guys and then what I do about it. But since at the end of the session it was running fine with Blazer brass, I think it just had a little break in, and once it got over it, shaped up its attitude, I think you've got a good gun. So like any other Glock, I do believe it's a good concealed carry gun with the ability to put extended magazines in it. It can be a good range day gun and definitely a good home defense gun. So all that flexibility at a relatively reasonable price gives you a lot of capabilities. If you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, kind of everywhere. Thank you.